Good evening, everybody, and welcome to BBC News on BBC Radio. I am your host, Mikaelson, and I am joined by my guest for this week, Mayim, and I will again avoid saying your last name. If you've noticed, I don't try, so I don't know if you want to tell us how to say it.
So the official pronunciation is Mayim Emanuel Bauheim, if that helps.
Okay, I'm probably just gonna not say your last name from now to the rest of time. And I'm a Phil. Yeah. Okay, we had a busy week again. I apologize for the background noise. My dog knows that I am no longer paying him any attention, and now he wants some.
Right.
Right. So I guess first, what we'll start off with, and Mayim, I know I gave you a list. We're not necessarily going to go in that order, but Mayim, why don't you first tell us a little bit about yourself?
A little bit about myself. Well, I guess the best title to describe me is I would say Maverick if I wanted to be egotistical about it. Maybe I just like stirring things up, and a lot of my political history and judicial history kind of stems from that, I suppose you could say. So that's kind of my role in the community, or at least how I think about it.
Right, so you came back. It was a thunderous roar recently. What made you? It didn't take you very long to pick a party. So what made you pick Labco?
I guess the biggest thing is how I explained it, I think, to His Majesty, is that I am always fond of like vaguely left-wing political messaging. In my previous stint as a citizen, I was a member first of the Green Party and then of the Labour Party, as run then by Duncan Bracey Bauheim, my brother. Hope he's doing well wherever he is. And so coming back from that, seeing that, no offense to anybody in Sinn Féin, but I wasn't particularly interested in joining them. And, the co-ops just kind of seemed like a natural choice, and I've always enjoyed being kind of in like a third party sort of situation, which the co-ops very much were at that time when I rejoined in June. So it seems like a natural.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Co-op was definitely very third party status, putting out one, maybe two good candidates. It's not that way anymore. And just without spilling too much from behind closed doors, I know very much that you were a large part of Labco's of their build up to where they are now. So, where do you see Labco going? Do you see yourself maybe standing to take 10 Downing one day? And I mean, just how do you feel about the journey Labco's been on over the summer heading into fall?
Okay, so I'll answer the second question in advance of the first. The second question, how I feel going into the fall, I think objectively, we're in the best stance we've been in, since well before I rejoined. And I think we've got a very solid slate of people that are active in the party, even if they don't all stand in like the next coming general election. We nonetheless will have that activity, that momentum, and the personalities that are going to help keep the party going, I would say. In particular, since Richard has joined, I find that we've been pretty effective in recruiting new members of the community, which has been, I don't think I need to, I forgot how I was going to segue into that, but what I wanted to say is that, I think Richard's been a great addition to the party. He's got this very good, can-do attitude, really active with us. It's been a blessing, having him there along with Christoph and myself and you, and getting Ulrich into the party. We've got a solid core, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So with all that said, now back to your first question of, do I see myself standing for 10 Downing? in the future, in the future is a it's an easy thing to say, and so like I will easily say yes in the future, but I don't know how close that future is, if that makes sense. It's certainly not anytime soon. I think Christoph is doing a fine job as prime minister. I'm happy to let him continue having the reins on that, so to speak. And yeah, who knows where things will take me, but I've got a lot on my plate right now with IRL in particular, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And a lot of it's cool stuff, but like it's still a lot at the same time. So certainly not. I would be shocked if the year ran out and I ran for prime minister at any point during that time.
Fair enough. Okay, so we're going to jump from that into the news for the week.
Certainly.
Easily the worst, easily the quietest bit of drama that had, I think, the largest chance to have a significant effect on the region was the Council of Nations. They recently, one of the members introduced a piece of legislation called the Eunice Statute. I hope I'm saying that right. Introduced by what was her name? Davina Madison, and basically it would ban people forum side or ban anybody from participating if they did not also participate in the role play on the regional message board. There was a lot of back and forth. A lot of people in the CON, including myself, argued that it was illegal based on how the CON statute is worded, because banning people from participating to a lot of us didn't sound any different from banning people from joining. And that spilled over into Parliament, where Parliament was asked to address it by Jacob Mikaelson, I think it was.
It was
Chris Mikaelson, excuse me. Sorry, guys.
To introduce the amendment.
Yeah. Way too many cousins and uncles. And I'm a political traitor. Anyways, with an amendment that would basically take the CON's ability away to regulate the RMB. And it turned out, and I'm going to reveal this right now, and I'm not going to say where I got this information from. I briefed you about this earlier, since I figured Parliament would be asked about this, and I wanted you in the loop on why and what. But is right. That for a while now, members of the Council of Nations were the ones that based themselves on the regional message board anyways, not the ones that participated with the government. They had been running a shadow Council of Nations for a while, running their own little plots and schemes, and if they didn't get their way here, and I think maybe they're just waiting to see how that, I guess, resolution or that amendment of Parliament plays out, but that they would boycott the Council of Nations, basically. And if anybody wants proofs of this, I can give it to you. It's coming to me. I'll redact some names out and then give it to you. But,
right.
Yeah, they would either boycott it either by just voting nay on everything or by mass resigning. It looked like there was a bit of a split there. So, well, I mean, what's your take, I guess, on the drama itself, on the legality of the Eunice Statute, and on the resolution or on the amendment before Parliament right now?
Right. Well, I guess kind of all of that said, I sit on the outside of the Council of Nations. I'm not a member of it, so most of the time I don't really engage with it in the day-to-day. The reason why I became aware of the Eunice Statute and like all the hullaboo that was going on surrounding it is because I was asked by Owen to represent him in a case in the event the Eunice Statute passed in, an effort to get it struck down by the Crown Court, basically, which the Eunice Statute failed, I believe, by a vote of 4 yeas to 7 yeas and 2 abstentions.
Correct.
So we'll not need to deal with that. I guess the interesting thing about the Eunice Statute is I'm not even sure how they would enforce like the distinction, in the sense, because the whole thing is like, if you don't post on the RMB at least once a week, like then you wouldn't have a right to participate in Council of Nations resolutions. And
They said in the statute specifically, if you don't role play as the leader of your nation state's nation at least one time per week on the RMB.
right, yeah, that is the wording, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of like with how many hundreds of posts get published to the RMB every single day, I'm just kind of like, who's keeping track of that? What authority are they? How are they going to be able to exercise the authority that they're even giving themselves to begin with? That was kind of, I suppose, my biggest concern. And
My mind
and
my mind
go
went
ahead.
to, so if they do that, or they ask the Secretary General to do it, we have a hard enough. Most of our Secretary General races are one horse races.
Yeah,
That you're not going to find anybody that wants to do that. I don't think.
I think even Ian Smith, who's another member of the co-ops, who's running it right now, I'm sure he's got his hands full with it, right? You know, uh, so my first question then, overall becomes relating to the applicability of it and how enforceable it is. And second of all, it's pretty flagrantly illegal. Like the exact wording of the provision in the Council of Nations Act that's relevant here, I have pulled up, is membership of the Council of Nations will be open to any person who is a nation lawfully present within the United Kingdom and whose owner holds full UK citizenship. Now, you could try to dance around it, I suppose, and say like, oh yeah, you could still participate in the Council of Nations, you just won't have a vote, and the counter argument, I suppose, that I would present in court at that point would be, well, what rights does the member of the Council of Nations have if they don't have the right of participation in that sense? It becomes like a null article at that point, and I don't think it would hold up in court. I was certainly ready to represent Owen in that case because I think he had a pretty clear-cut case overall. So there's that. As for this revelation that you've just shared, concerning this like secret side chat, I can't speak as to the veracity of it. Again, sitting on the outsides, of all of this. If it is true, I suppose they're going to have their fun however they want to do it. Basically, they're welcome to do it, I suppose. I'm not sure what they think it would prove because the Council of Nations like statute, what it governs and how it's written, is ultimately out of their hands. It's in our hands in Parliament. So it would be a protest, I'm sure, but I'm not really sure what they would gain out of it.
I think lobbying Parliament would probably be their better bet than picking up their toys and going home.
And judging from the response to Chris Mickelson's amendment presently before the Commons right now, I imagine they would have a lot of common ground with several MPs. Most of all, of course, one of their own, the honourable member for Wantage, William Cavendish Beauclerk. I think I said that right.
I get yelled at every time I try, so with his last name.
We'll find out when he's online to hear this, I suppose. But
Yeah.
anyhow, certainly he's been quite opposed to it. You yourself registered some opposition to it. Sorry. I think there was another member that wasn't too fond of it, but I might be hallucinating that. Either way, it's certainly a contested item before the Commons right now. So I guess if I have any advice, regardless of whether or not this side chat is happening or not, my advice to concerned Council of Nations members who primarily take their role play through the CON, your parliamentarians are here to hear you out. Certainly we would like to. That's why I try to publish my little newsletter every week, and even MPs who don't do that, are nonetheless open to hear these viewpoints and discussions. They participate in the Strangers Gallery. They participate on Discord. Again, if you're like William in particular, they participate in the R&B themselves. There are avenues, and I encourage, regardless of whether or not you're in on any conspiracy, I encourage you folks to reach out, and employ these tools of engagement that you have at your disposal. Certainly, we'd like to hear you.
Fair enough. Yeah, and I agree. I think, I guess, much is being made ado about the relationship between, I guess, the R&B folks and the forum folks. And the forum is ultimately where the governing of the region comes from. Right?
Right.
And again, and I said it in Parliament, I think taking R&B regulation out of the hands of the R&Bers is ultimately not helpful, because they know better than Parliament or the King or anybody or the Prime Minister or anybody what the R&B needs. Okay, reading that R&B gives me a headache. I can't.
Me too.
And yeah, there is some bad behavior on the R&B. It's not as bad as some people say it is, but
no, absolutely not. Yeah,
there was a time before you came back, Mayim, that we lost. I think we lost an embassy or two regions we had an embassy with. They changed their settings to where embassy regions can no longer post on the R&B because our people just went over there and trolled the living hell out of them. So
that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. So, but it's not as bad as people say it is, and I think that ability should definitely have their input from the CON standpoint.
I suppose this is something that I had thought about a little bit in my first term as a citizen, well before the Council of Nations was really a blink in anyone's eye. I remember vaguely campaigning for Prime Minister on the idea that we needed to get a role play set up, but certainly not having the details as fleshed out as what the CON ended up becoming. So from that standpoint, I can definitely say to those that were responsible for bringing it about and for giving it life, certainly that's been a really cool development. Absolutely. And but of course it is. I feel like when I look at, from my outsider view, looking at other regions in the game today, especially comparing now even to a few years ago when I started playing, right? Offsite forums are really, they almost, and correct me if I'm wrong, back because you've been around way longer, they almost seem like an old school way of community organization. I've seen regions that have only a Discord, for instance, and they just do everything on their Discord, and that blows my mind.
Right? Contrarius is the most famous version of that, but that's because they're like a has-been who never really was a Ben, and they're trying anything to breathe new life into their community. Yeah, but man, I remember a time last time I was in UK, we had a Skype chat that nobody ever used. Remember Skype? Yeah.
Oh, that's old school. Yeah.
We had a Chatsy that we occasionally went on there and trolled. It was usually just Silver Steps trolling the rest of us by changing her name over and over and over again.
That's so real. That's so Silver Steps again, I feel like.
Yeah. But, Chatsy was, and Silver's gonna kill me in my sleep for this, but Chatsy was not good. It was not a good program. It was just a pain in the neck. And then
I suppose we haven't heard about it, these days,
Then you remember IRC?
IRC, that must have been well before my time back. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was what regions were using when I started playing in 2011.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But I think a lot of regions value a form for like regions like ours with a government. They value it for that, right? Because that is a significant, like the politics in this region are what makes the region.
Not only that, but like the forum offers like a unique benefit in terms of like records keeping. You know, like trying to find old messages you sent on Discord is like hell, right?
Oh, it
You know,
sucks.
it was probably the same case for if they even had this capacity on Chatsy or IRC. It was probably the same thing. You know, same hellish, energy, right? Trying to keep track of anything.
On IRC, you just had to scroll.
Right on. Oh, yeah. Okay, that tracks. So, yeah, it's there are definitely with these benefits that we get from the forum. There comes like a certain culture, I think, and this is the point that I circle back to the whole Council of Nations thing. There's a culture that comes out of that, right? And it's a fundamentally different culture. No better, no worse, but different culture than the sorts of things you get from like R&B players or like people who play on the NationStates forum a lot, or like people who are like Discord people, like really hardcore Discord people, and as like a flagship name region, being around so long and having ties to a real life like theme, therefore attracting a lot of people who are interested in that theme, like myself. You get all of those different kinds of game players,
Right.
and the Council of Nations is definitely a very valiant attempt, from what I can tell. Again, sitting on the outside, could be talking out of my butt here. Very valiant attempt at trying to reconcile those different styles of gameplay with like what we've always been known for, and it's not easy. It clearly comes with growing pains, and I do hope that through this process, despite like the controversy that surrounded the UNIS statutes and the controversy surrounding R&B moderation that flares up every now and then, it's a continual issue brought to the public eye, regardless of how serious it might actually be. With all these things, we try to just allow these different kinds of game playing within our community to be like a game playing region for all, in that essence. And it's hard, but I trust that through this process we'll be able to get some sort of clarity from like how each side views things, and hopefully to find some sort of dialectic solution to go forward.
Fair enough, and I think we beat this horse well and truly dead. Let's move on to the by-election.
Right on.
I'm gonna avoid stroking my own ego here, as I did last weekend with that show, because I knew the results of the poll before the show went live, obviously. But other than I feel like I put in some good work my first week in Parliament. I'm definitely not like I definitely had some more influential members than myself, such as a Killian, sit on the opposite side of my piece of legislation, and if that's what they want to do, that's fine, but I'm not going to back down to them. That's just never been my game. You can ask a Killian for sure. That I've never been one to back down from just because somebody with more influence than me opposes what I want to do. So, anyways, I'll let you comment on the by-election.
So before we touch briefly on your piece of legislation, yeah, I think we'll focus on the by-election. The by-election, going into it, I genuinely had no clue how it would turn out. Like, I really didn't. I was a runoff for sure, because we were fundamentally looking at, and I frankly don't think you'll take umbrage if you hear me describe it this way. We were looking at 3 candidates that were considered unelectable, right?
Uh-huh.
We were looking at Mikaelson, we were looking at JLW,
I
who
roll.
was like a perpetual,
I
like when he
roll.
ever got Parliament, he was writing on like coattails, basically, is kind of the way I looked at it. And then we were looking at Pine Needle Project, and anyone who's seen me spend more than 30 seconds in regional politics with him can guess how I tend to feel about him. Certainly, he's allowed to have his opinions. I'm just allowed to not agree with him, right? So
Sure.
all these things come together, and I think at the end of the day, there was an element, I think, for a lot of us that weren't around the last time you were like in NSUK or nation states in general. For a lot of us, there was an element of like the devil we don't know, so to speak, and that's what we voted for, right? I voted for you, of course, because I thought you would be competent, and you're a member of my party on top of that,
Mm-hmm.
so that was a pretty easy decision for me to make. But I would assume that compared to Pine's like delusions of grandeur mixed with a persecution complex, and JLW's like long-standing record of like aimless combativeness, you know, that between those three options, you kind of seem like the natural choice. And I think the vote reflected that. So, of course, now the duty comes on you to um, hold up to that and get things done. And your first week's been good so far. I'll touch briefly on the BBC Act amendment that you proposed, which I supported. Um, as I said in the Commons thread itself, it really boils down to a philosophical disagreement as to like what nature does a royal appointment have, and we want the crown to be a very neutral endeavor. Certainly, we want very even keeled people to take the throne in the first place, and we want them to act fairly and without regard um, once they're in that office,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so there's a tendency in some circles that I've seen in the thread itself to want to keep the crown relatively unfettered from the day-to-day workings of Parliament or His Majesty's government and things of that nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
I understand where these people are coming from. I think it's an ideal more than a reality. And what I mean by that is the constitutional and day to day reality is the sovereign appoints whoever they want to the House of Lords, which is, if you dare look at this session, or really any session I've been a part of, has been a political decision, if a neutral one nonetheless. Neutral and political are not exclusive here, but it has been a political decision. His Majesty's government, although it operates largely independent from him, operates in his name. Like the name is not accidental, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even in the UK, which has an even weaker monarch constitutionally than what NSUK has, like it's still His Majesty's government. The name's not accidental. So, kind of the way I look at it is because we want the crown to be neutral, there needs to be, for at least for positions that don't directly concern the royal household, happy to let that be His Majesty's bag, certainly. Um, for decisions that really concern the rest of the region, the BBC with its own like desire for neutrality and reporting, and it's how it gets into the weeds politically as we're doing right now. You know, a decision like that, I'm happy to leave to the crown, in as much as there is some form of oversight with it.
Okay.
I'm happy to not have it be the prime minister's decision, which I believe used to be the case. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It was joint
Um,
between Prime Minister and King.
okay, yeah, and that That's a little excessive, mainly because it's just not a very streamlined process. The Crown appointing someone and then the Commons taking a look at it, that seems reasonable enough to me. I'm fine with that. So that's kind of why I support your amendment. But again, I do see where um, opponents of your bill come from on this particular topic. And at press time, it looks like we're 3 votes in favor, 2 against, 1 abstention, and we're just waiting on the Prime Minister to vote on that. So I guess we'll see how that goes.
If he doesn't vote within the time frame, is that a pass or no?
Yeah, it's a pass because although there are more abstentions and nays than yays, there are still more yays than nays. The abstentions, just in this case, being like, okay, they sat on it, so we would still pass this on to the Lords.
Right word for its vitality.
I have no idea how the Lords are gonna. Like, I can't even predict how the Lords are gonna look at that. So best of luck.
Based on whose post Constance liked, I know what she's gonna say about it. She's just gonna take 6,000 words to say it.
Yeah, she's kind of grilled some of my bills this turn too.
That's
why we like her. That's why we like her. She takes effort to say what she says. And she tries to be as fair with it as possible. That's the way I look at it. But certainly she and I tend to approach things from a very different philosophical background. And so, yeah, I'm not really surprised that some of my bills have been shredded as a result.
That poor Third Amendment to the TRA, man. I think I run through the ringer.
Yeah, I'm glad that it ended up going through the deliberative process that it did. I think we ultimately got to a solution that was at least halfway decent. Not to stroke my own ego or anything. But it took a while to get there. And for me, that's kind of reflective of a good working Commons relationship with everybody in the Commons. And, Lords that are tough, but still generally fair.
Right. Okay, and I guess we'll move into Parliament. We've covered most of Parliament on accident. Other than the TRA Act Amendment 5, which I believe has passed. Right?
It's going to pass.
It can only go to 3 hours ago.
Yeah, it's going to pass. It's been unanimous eyes up to this point. It's going to pass. I'll be able to. Yeah, I think I'll be able to send it to Royal Assent tomorrow morning.
Depending on when Christoph votes.
If he does, if not, then just it'll be 48 hours roughly. So
right.
Nonetheless.
Yeah. Parliament has been annoyed with an active chancellor, but that is okay. And then one more piece of business to address today is, I guess, the Foreign Secretary.
Right.
William found himself embroiled in, I guess, a bit of drama for a couple of days leading up to his resignation. He had, he represented Pine Needle in that insane case against the UKAF. And
yeah, that was fun.
He got a little bit of crap for that, but, I said my piece on that. It is what it is. Then he disappeared for probably about 3 days and came back and quit. So I'd hate to think that, in spite, everybody says they're resigning because of real life to save face. I almost never take that at face value. I hate to say it. That's just the way it is.
Right.
So I would hate to think that is why he got embroiled in some drama. He lasted about 5 seconds as a CON Secretary General before he got pushed out. And I would say it didn't really take that much to push him out, to be honest, of that job. So I'd hate to think that little drama pushed him to resign office as Foreign Secretary. Because with our Foreign Secretary portfolio right now, Parliament is definitely more time consuming than that. Let's just be honest. I don't know what you think.
So I have, I guess, a number of thoughts about this topic. Um,
Uh huh.
I guess regarding something that the man himself often jokes about is how many portfolios he's taken on for himself. And he certainly gives a go at every single one of them, which
Mm-hmm.
is admirable. Um, Especially for someone, I had to double check to make sure I wasn't talking on my butt again here. Yeah, he's only been here since April of this year. That's a little over 5 months now, meaning it was about 3 months and some change when he got elected to Parliament. Um, he's been a huge go getter as far as like getting involved in the community and trying to do things that he thinks are right. A number of political disagreements I've had with him, nonetheless don't dim any respect I've developed for him as a result.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to circle back to just the whole million portfolios kind of thing that he's run into. It seems like a more extreme version of kind of what I did when I started out in NSUK. Like I hit the ground running pretty quickly for those that need their memory jogged. With constituent nations, Northern Ireland specifically, that I was assigned to.
I
Hit the
remember
ground
that
with that pretty
system.
quickly. Got elected to Parliament a little over a month after I joined. I did a law degree, was in Right v Talleyrand as a counsel alongside Josephine Talleyrand or Hanover. She's had a million surnames. I can't remember which was hers at the time. Um, I was doing a lot of things, and like a lot of things that I had just left out at the time. And when you focus on something, or when you get involved with something that's really controversial, like I did with the electoral reform bill, that was kind of mine and Killian's baby in early 2021. You combine that with everything else you've committed yourself to in this community, and it genuinely can burn you out a little bit, and maybe I don't like to speculate too much on like real life goings on, so I will just take him at face value and say that I assume there were also some real life things that necessitated his attention for a couple of days. You throw that all on top of nation state stuff, and it's kind of like, yeah, no wonder you kind of want to like take a step back at least from something, right? For me, I kind of resigned like most of everything, and then was kind of back at it 2 weeks later. But it was kind of an implosion almost, and so I almost have to commend William for not imploding underneath all that pressure. Like he's still active in commons debates and everything, you know, and the RMB clearly, and those are two big things, and he's holding it up despite that. As you did mention, with our foreign policy being what it is, um, it was probably the easiest thing for him to give up. I don't disagree with that analysis at all. Um, Certainly, I guess just to recap, I guess I commend him for again not imploding, but overall, I do hope that he kind of takes this as a time to allow himself to realize that he can slow down a little bit, right? Like it's okay to do that, you know, and like no one will think less of you if you decide to do that, you know, because you're still like active in the community and everything. You're still like
Right.
engaging with things, and you got to engage at a level that's healthy, I think,
Right.
and it takes time to learn that.
Yeah. So, like what Klaus and Lucas alluded to last week, is that so the region definitely gives chances to people who they see are putting in the work. Now, that does not mean you have to do everything. Right now, obviously, the British Museum, can't see how time consuming that is. I can't.
Right.
Right. I mean, how much work could it be? But you don't have to do it all. And this might be a little bit of an extreme example, me and you, because you and I have history here, right? We already had a
Yeah.
little bit of a foundation. But you and I each came in and concentrated on like one thing and made it happen.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I picked up the like most time-consuming office in the entire region, but
Right.
pick a niche. When I first got here, I ran the foreign office for like 6 months straight, and then I ran the military for like a year when it was still part of His Majesty's government as the Secretary of Defense. That annoyed Constance St. James greatly, by the way. It was hilarious because I got the region changed from defender to independent against her wishes. But
Yeah. I could see her not being very fond of
she
that.
was very annoyed. Um, Actually pushed her to run for prime minister, believe it or not.
Well,
Yeah. So you don't have to do it all. Pick a thing that you really like and that you're good at. And then if you get like a secondary side job, that's fine. Right? Like, Killian
right on.
looks like he's busy, but 2 of his jobs are judge and deputy prime minister. I mean,
Right.
yeah, how busy could he be there, right?
Right.
So that's just my advice to William and to anybody who's coming in. Find something that you're interested in and then get really good at it. And the region will give you a shot at, if you ever want to get elected as something.
I think that's solid advice. I would concur with that.
Yeah. So, let's see. Did we miss anything on the list? I don't think so. I think we got it all.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, so this concludes episode 7 of BBC News on BBC Radio. From Mayim and myself, so long and good night.
Good night, Brendan. Take care.